We are in this series, Save the Date, and we started this last week, and I hope it was a good time for those of you who were here. I hope that it was something that made you think. If you weren't here, just a quick recap. One thing we did is we wanted to redefine what dating is. We wanted to give ourselves just an idea. How do we image God in the realm of dating? Because that's the purpose of our life. We are here to image God in everything. So the definition we came up with was dating. It's a process used by God for His glory, where you and others are encouraged, refined, and transformed into His image. That whole process of dating, whether they're failed relationships or relationships that are ongoing right now or ones that are yet to come, and you're in a place of waiting, that whole process, God is at work in all of it to refine you, to transform you, to bring you closer and closer to Him. We can't miss that. Otherwise, when we have a relationship that ends, we're going to be just, oh, it's the worst thing ever. But even in that heartbreak, God is at work in us, which gives us hope. So it transformed into His image, and that whole time, while growing in depth of relationship with another person through a series of dates, to see if you'd be good at doing life together. Because that's what it's about. There's an evaluation process that you're going through. You're looking to see, is this a person that I should be yoked with for the rest of my life? Now, we talked about that you needed to make sure that your primary relationship with God, who's the only one who can meet that core need of yours for love and acceptance, is only God and only through Jesus Christ. Everything else will not work. We looked at Adam, who was perfect, and we looked at Eve, who was perfectly made for him. And as soon as that primary relationship was removed, it all fell apart. There was horrible things that unfolded amongst them. And so that's what we looked at. We got to make sure those primary relationships are intact. And then we had lots of conversations, I heard last week, about as HEB opened on September 12th, that they were ready. They were set. They had their shelves were stocked with food. Had you been there on August 12th, the month before, that wouldn't have been the case. And you would have come in, you would have been disappointed. It would have been a very frustrating experience as opposed to the wonderful experience everybody else had. And we talked about if you are not ready, if you're not at a place where you're drawing your life value and identity and worth from Christ and Christ alone, you just need to back out of the whole dating arena. You just need to say, hit pause, take a step back and say no, because when I'm coming in here, I'm demanding from other people something that they cannot give. I'm asking from a secondary relationship for you to meet my deepest needs, which man and woman were never created to do that. And we have to know that. Otherwise, we're going to continue this destructive cycle. That primary relationship is so vitally important. And so tonight, because it's so important, we need to how do we know? How do we know when the people that we're thinking about pursuing, what are some signs? What are some indicators? How can we evaluate? What are hints that their primary relationship might be solid? That this is a person that would be safer for me to be in a relationship with than somebody whose life is maybe just a hot mess. And so we want to be wise with our evaluation process, because when we don't evaluate, we enter into things and we set ourselves up for an amazing amount of hurt. Prime example, sugar. And you're like, well, great, whatever. Sugar in April Fool's Day at the Berkey household growing up was interesting. We lived in Michigan at this time, and I woke up, came down, and my kids aren't here so I can say this, we had cereal, there was always this big thing of sugar on the table that you could just scoop it and heap it. And so I loved my Cheerios, I loved my Chex, because they would have 6 cups of sugar on them. And so I came down, I sit down, and I pour my Chex, I pour my milk, and I look to grab the sugar. I open it up, I take a scoop, and I look at it, and I just put it down. And I'm like, that's not sugar. And my mom was like, what? What are you talking about? My sister was like, what? What are you talking about? I said, that's salt. And they're like, how do you know? I'm like, well, just look at it. Just, you can tell the way that the granules are whatever, it's just different. The color is different. It's just not right. So I evaluated that, and my mom was like, oh, because she had tried to fool me. Now, what she didn't know, well, let me back up. My keen evaluation skills saved me from taking in a whole bunch of sugar. But what my mom didn't know is that my sister tried to play the same joke. So what had happened was my sister, before going to bed, had run down, taken the sugar, dumped it into, we had these big red whatever things that there. The biggest one had flour, the next one had sugar, the next one had tea, I think, and the other one I have no idea. There's like weird things in there. But on the sugar one, so she came and took the sugar bowl, dumped it in there, and then filled it with salt. And she's like, I'm going to get that, Todd. Well, my mom came down later and said, I'm going to get that, Todd. So she took the sugar bowl, dumped it into the sugar, the big sugar, and then filled it with salt. And so because my mom was not very keenly observant like I was, the joke was on her, she ruined all of the sugar in the big container, all because she did not properly evaluate. Moral of the story, don't try to swap out sugar and salt with Todd, although later in my life I made the mistake on my own without anybody trying to do that. But this idea of evaluation is critical to do in all areas of our life. And it's not just me saying this. Jesus talks about this. He says, watch out for false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruit. Now you're like, well, what does that have to do with dating? Remember, we have to pull principles from Scripture because dating, what we have right now of dating, that was not around, that concept was not there when Scripture was written. But the idea of guarding ourselves, of watching, of evaluating before we step into a closer relationship and trust a prophet, what they have to say, that idea of evaluation was absolutely there. And Jesus tells us, you be careful, watch out. Because why? Because literally there are people who look like they're the real deal, but it's all a lie. They are faking you out so that they can go ahead and manipulate a situation and control you. That never happens in the dating world. Never do you talk to somebody like, oh yeah, I'm awesome at this, I'm awesome at this, I'm awesome at this, and you get into the relationship and you realize, man, you are the most selfish individual. You're not awesome at these things. Never does anybody ever lie in a dating relationship, right? That never happens. No, it happens all the time. It happens all the time because there's desperate men and women who don't have their primary relationship intact. And so because of that, they're looking to shove something else in there, and they'll be whatever you want them to be as long as you will come into a relationship with them so they can begin to just suck life out of you that you can't give. And then tension explodes. So this idea of evaluating, that is massively important when it comes to dating. And I know we know this. You're like, Todd, that's not rocket science. I know we know this, but do we evaluate correctly? I mean, what are the things that we're looking at? And so tonight, this are the 3 stops I want us to make. First one is why even evaluate? Why do that? And we won't spend much time there because it's kind of like duh. And then the second thing is specific indicators. I'm gonna look at what are some indicators we can look at and say, when I see this, there's a great chance that probably there's a strong relationship here. I need to further investigate. And then the third one is we're going to help the blind, and we'll talk about that in a moment because if we're honest, I bet you we have all been the blind person in a relationship, and so we need some help at times. So let's dive right in here with why evaluate. And I was thinking about, so we always evaluate, and when I go to eat at Chick-fil-A, I come in and I think, regular, spicy, or nuggets? Salad, too healthy. You know, and so I spend just a little bit of time thinking about what sounds good. But if I'm buying a house, I spend a whole lot more time considering before I buy. Makes sense, right? I mean, maybe if you never bought a house, if you bought a car, you probably spent more time looking at the features of a car before you turn over however much money. If you're thinking about when you buy a computer, you're probably sat there and said, well, I don't know, let me look. And you compare the features and you do some research. You're constantly evaluating. And you do a greater evaluation, the greater the risk of loss. And newsflash, we don't date just to pass time. Dating is with a purpose. And the purpose, you're looking to see somebody to do life with. And I called my parents today just because I just thought I would be a nice son and call. But I've been asking around different people, different questions. But I called them and said, hey, Mom, how's it going? Good. I said, I don't have a lot of time to talk. Bad son. Anyway, I was like, Mom, you guys just celebrated 53 years of marriage. Can you tell me Who in your life has the greatest potential to give you pain? Who has the greatest potential to give you joy? Who's the greatest support in your life? And she thought for a moment, and you know what she said? No guesses? Her husband, 53 years, walking through everything they've walked through. This is the person who has the greatest potential of building her up. And it's also the person who can say things and do things that will hurt her deeply. There will never be another human relationship that can hurt you and wound you or build you up more so than a spouse. And because of that, the stakes are high. And so, knowing the stakes are high, we would be wise to do some evaluation. And you may think, well, I'm just smart enough. I'll just know these things. You know, it doesn't matter who I marry. Well, there was the wisest guy around. His name was Solomon. And he really made some foolish decisions with women, a whole bunch of women. And the end result was this. When Solomon became old, his wives shifted his allegiance to other gods. Solomon continued just to ignore what everybody would say around him and say, no, I want this woman, I want this woman, I want this woman, I want this woman, I want this woman. And the end result was these women shifted his heart from what he was created for. Is it any wonder then when his son is hearing all these wonderful words of wisdom, didn't take any of them? Became a horrible king right after him? I mean, just because you say the right thing doesn't mean, people are listening because your actions have to line up with your words. Solomon, the wisest of the wise, the smartest of the smart, his spouse, or in this case, spouses, were able to move his heart from where it should be. And so because of that, if our primary purpose is to image God, we want to make sure that we're yoked with somebody else who is going to help support us, who's going to encourage us that direction for the rest of our lives. That great investment, we have to know it's huge, means that we should do some work on the other side if I do, right? I mean, I know we know this, but do you really know it? Or do you just get so giddy because he's cute? Do you just get so giddy because, nobody's ever said yes when you've asked them out? Do you just throw all logic out the window because it just feels nice and fluffy inside? We need to make sure when we enter into the dating realm that we don't check out with our mind. So we're coming to this is challenging now. Okay, I asked a ton of people yesterday at church. It was a really wonderful thing. Like, hey, what are some indicators? What are the top 2 indicators that if you think somebody's walking well with the Lord because you see these 2 things, what are they? And it was amazing. There was great variety that was given to me, and it didn't matter really how old or how young, married or not married. It was just very interesting to see people's responses. And what a wonderful dialogue that was. But here's my fear of starting to give you some indicators or characteristics or traits. Because what more than likely at least one of us in this room will say, oh, well, I just need to do that. Then I'm a good person and good with God. Following Jesus has nothing to do with being this incredible, amazing person. Being a follower of Jesus is saying, I just make a hot mess of things. That's why Jesus had to come and die. You know that, right? If you don't know it, the gospel message is really pretty simple. It's that you and we were born messed up, and we've continued to mess up. We've been in active rebellion against God. We've disappointed, we've shunned him, we've cut him out of all sorts of our lives. We've made life all about us. And the end result of that wonderfulness of that we've lived is going to be an eternity away from him and a very low quality of life here and now. But Jesus, he said, no, I'll step into the place and I will pay the price of death that you and I have earned. And for anybody who believes in me, not Todd, in Jesus, if you just believe in me, then eternal life is yours. So it's nothing to do with works for salvation. And as we walk with Jesus throughout our lives, he's going to continue to rearrange things in our lives, because the Spirit that comes and dwells in us when there's this new birth that happens, when we believe in Jesus, something changes. It's called the new birth. We're a new creation. We're going to talk about it here the rest of the semester, actually, about all that happens when you place your faith in Jesus Christ. You become a new creation. The old is gone. New things have come, and they're incredible. But that new creation, that new spirit says, I need to be released. And it works to make you look more and more like Jesus. That's what Romans 8:29 tells us. And so that process, the fancy church word, is sanctification. And how much enjoyment you have of Jesus, there's an agreement with you so that you're like, okay, I agree. You say this is how I should live. Okay, I will follow your leading. And so you follow leading. As you follow God's leading, it's just going to begin to manifest, and you're going to begin to look different. There's a radical difference between trying to say, I can do these attributes versus those attributes will flow out of me. An example I've used before is if you pass two rooms, both have boys playing the piano, and you're like, wow, they both sound exactly the same. Well, the one is the kid hates piano and his parents make him do it. And the other one, the kid absolutely loves piano and can't believe that he gets to play. And they both practice for an hour. Is there a radical difference between those two? Now, the first room, even though they sound and look the same on the outside, on the inside, the first one hates every moment of it, and the other one is it's an overflow of his heart. And that's what it is to walk with Jesus. We're walking with him. It's the overflow of our heart that produces these changes. So as I'm going to give you a list, please know that this list is not sitting there like, okay, this is now legalism time. I have to do these things. These are just indicators that show there's probably a pretty solid relationship with Jesus, that your primary needs are being met by him and him alone. That way we can figure out who's a pretender versus who's the real deal. Because, again, this would never happen. Never would a male come into a Bible study or a church event thinking, this is the best place to find a good woman. I don't care about what she believes, but I just heard that Christian women are nice, and so I want to be married to a nice woman even though I'm not a nice man. And come in and just pretend to go through the motions until, whoosh, I got a hold. That would never, ever happen. Never would a woman come through with the same thing of like, man, I'm just lonely and I just need somebody. And I hear that those Christian men are pretty easy to manipulate because, they just think that Jesus is all that. And so I can slip my baggage in there and they'll have no idea. And then I can manipulate and control that relationship. Never would a broken person walk through these doors with the intent of looking to say, how can I use somebody here? Never. That's sarcasm. It happens all the time. I've seen it over and over and over. So we need to be very wise because we want to be good evaluators because our heart's at stake, right? We don't want to just enter in and be like, we want to enter in and we want to walk well. And so here it is. I want to come back here and we're going to follow Jesus' words again. Watch out for false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing. Watch out for false daters who come to you in sheep's clothing. But inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruit. And so I have this for you. Look how easy this is to identify. They're buds on a tree. The best way for you or I to identify this, unless we're trained in this fine horticulture thing. Is that what it is? Horticulture? Am I getting it right? I don't know. What's what? Okay, well, yeah, Tim's not. Okay, so here it is. But if you give these buds time, if you give it a little bit of time, you can be like, oh, that's turning into an apple, and this one's turning into a pear. It's really, really easy. Give it some time. So when we're coming in and somebody starts off and they're like, oh, yeah, this guy's a stud. He is helping serve by setting up chairs. He's doing all these wonderful things. He's at every event. Give it some time, ladies. Same thing, men, when the women come in, like, give it time and see, are these characteristics there long term? Now, first one here, contentment. I think one of the greatest indicators to see if somebody is walking well with Jesus is they just ooze contentment. Paul, who's in prison, he's in prison while writing this. I've experienced times of need and times of abundance. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of contentment. It doesn't matter whether things are going well for me. It doesn't matter if things are going poorly for me. I've learned the secret of contentment. And earlier in the letter, Paul would be telling you, like, man, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. He's like, the secret is just Christ. It's interesting, this is followed by one of our very wonderfully misquoted verses, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And we always think like, oh, well, we're down on our luck. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. No, it's not saying you can fly. No. What? In the middle of turmoil, in the middle of joy, and any place in between that there is contentment, I can walk through any of those things with peace and joy because of Jesus Christ. You want to like an indicator, a great indicator of somebody absolutely loves the Lord? Look at how just contentment. And when I talk about contentment, what I mean here is you're not going to see these massive fluctuations in attitude. Like, everything stinks. I hate everybody. Oh, the next day is so great. Oh, no, it's horrible. You're not going to see these. Woohoo! Because Christ is rolling on all of that. He's sitting there. He's like, no, it's all okay. There's contentment. So when the bottom falls out, Christ never left you. And there's hope. There's no need to boast of the achievements, hoping that somebody will give you finally an attaboy, that you finally found your identity because you've won state back 20 years ago. Or you could be like Rico from Napoleon, Napoleon could have won state, I bet you I can throw that there steak over that mountain. Like whatever. You don't need to begin to boast about achievements to build yourself up because you're content no matter what it is. You got the best job you've always wanted, there's contentment. You just lost that job, yes, there's hurt, but there's still contentment because there's more to life than your job. Also, you need to know, contentment is not muted joy. It's not like, here's joy, yeah, and here's contentment. That's not it. Contentment's just like, it's not boring. Contentment's attractive. You know it when you see it, you're like, well, I just want to be around that person because there's just something radiating out of them that just oozes awesomeness, and I don't know what it is. Like, doesn't matter what they run into, there's just almost an underline of joy. You can see this. If you want a mark of the absence of contentment, grumblers, listen to what they say. It's just always like, these people are against me, these people are against me, oh, this happened, this is against me, the world's against me, everybody's against me, this person hates me, this person hates me, I try to do the right thing, and everybody just takes advantage of me, blah, 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 blah. Boy, that just sounds like contentment. Because you do realize, in the midst of every problem, God's at work. I mean, you know that, right? No matter what, God is at work. And because he's at work refining you, there can be contentment. And some of you who don't know me and don't know my wife, Erin, you say, you don't even know. Track down the video of our story. Both of us will sit there and tell you whether it's through the loss of a husband to cancer or whether it's divorce to somebody who was incredibly unfaithful and wanted nothing more to do with me and being discarded, that in those deep, dark, horrible times, God was at work. Always at work. So contentment, to me, that's one of those big things. You know it when you see it, and that's like, okay, that's an indicator. I want to step into that a little bit more. I want to get to know this person a little bit more because there's probably some attachment to Jesus Christ in this. Another one here is community. I think another mark of almost maturity, if you want to call that, of somebody who is really well established in their walk with Jesus is community. Hebrews chapter 10, 24 through 25, and let us take thought of how to spur one another on to love and good works. I could have used this verse for encouragement because I think encouragement is a big deal as well, another mark of maturity. Not abandoning our own meetings as some are in the habit of doing. Following Jesus well, it's a community thing. It's not meant to be in isolation. I think marks of maturity, that primary relationship's intact, that there is contentment and there is community. When we talk about community, they are actually involved with others. There's not just, I have community. It's somebody that I used to know when I was 8 in the neighborhood. There are actual people that they actually talk to who actually know them and they know them. There's this community of people. And I encourage you, if you're like, oh, well, maybe begin to get to know who are those others, because who you surround yourself with will tell a whole lot about who you are. Who are those in your inner circle? Are they a bunch of discontented individuals? Or is that near circle filled with people who radiate the love of Jesus Christ? And what does that community actually do? Do all they do is sit and play games? Is all that community does is just sit and like figure out like, let's Netflix? Is that it? Is it all inward focused? Everything that they do is all about me, and my entertainment and my comfort? I mean, there's a lot of people who are part of clubs. They have people around and they have some depth of relationship, but what are they doing? What does that community do? Are they looking to be inclusive and bring other people in? And when they come in and they're playing games together, the conversation turns from just like, wow, that was a great card you played, but we're waiting for Todd to play because he doesn't understand the game. But as we're waiting for him to play, man, I got to tell you, this week has been a hard week for me, but I saw Jesus work in these different ways. What is your community doing? Yeah, and the other one, do they give community away? And what I mean by that, are they welcoming? Are they just waiting like, I'll be friendly if somebody says hi to me? Or are they the ones who are going out and say, hey, because I've been given much, because I have life in Jesus Christ, I can come out to you. I can come out and I can extend my hand. I can welcome you into my home. I can show people great love because I am greatly loved. Contentment community. Next thing here, this idea of serving others. In Galatians, also written by Paul, chapter 5:13, he says, you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity to indulge your flesh. Yeah, Christ set you free from the law. Christ has bought your freedom, but don't use this freedom to make life all about you. But through love, serve one another. Some just really easy, practical ways that you can see this. Man, do they have an attitude when they walk in a room? They're like, hey, how can I help? How can I help? Do they have to be asked to help, or do they just like, I already know chairs need to be moved, and so without asking, they just begin to go because it's a way to serve others through their actions? Is it when somebody's moving, they sit there and be like, no, I have something to do. My dog needs their teeth brushed, so I can't help you move. Are they always looking for an out, or are the people showing up all the time when there's a need and they have the ability? Are they moving forward to serve others? That is a strong indicator that there's something other-minded going on inside of them. And that attitude of other-mindedness is not natural to you and I, but it's very, very natural to the Spirit of God. How about their words? Are they other-minded? Do they serve others with their words? Do they ask others questions? Or do they just want to talk about themselves and declare their own stories? Is it like, man, I'm fascinated by you. I love your story. Tell me more. Or is it like, yeah. Let me just tell you about more what I did. You know, is it all about me? Or is there an interest where I'm looking to serve you and build you up? And then how do they serve others? How do they talk about them when they aren't present? Because that's another way that you can serve people. If you're in a conversation and we're talking and somebody says, oh, man, Erin did this and this and this and this, do I just like, oh, yeah, she did this a lot? Like, do they just join right in with the gossip? Or like, hey. Yeah, man, I don't know if that's appropriate that we're talking that way about Erin. Of course, if I'm in that conversation, you start talking about my wife that way, we'll be like, come on. Have you talked to her about it? Because if not, let's go. Let's dance, because what you're saying is not true. That's my lady. I throw down. All right, so are they serving others with their actions, with their words? Another one, peacemaker. If possible, so far as it depends on you, Paul again writing here in Romans, live peaceably with all people. If getting to know the person, every story you hear is about how stupid everybody else is, and how they've been cheated every other place, and how every relationship that they have, there is always tension, run. If there's tension in every other relationship, what do you think is going to happen in your dating relationship?
Well, I figure that if 93% of the other relationships are tension-filled, that leaves 7% to be ones that are going to be joyful, and that must be me.
No! What's going to happen, buddy boy or girly girl, is going to be massive drama is going to happen in that relationship because that individual probably has their mind and their heart set only on the unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. Drama, 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 drama. Now, I'm not saying there's not drama that happens, because when we enter into other people's lives, there's dramatic things that happen. But if every relationship, if everybody else is always stupid and they're always wrong, if they can't go to H-E-B and not have like a run-in with a checker, no, you're charging me. Now, you had your finger on the scale. You charged me for an extra banana. I can't, a manager, like, if that's like, what is going on? You're looking for a peacemaker. When I was at Little Caesars Pizza a while ago, man, it was crazy. I thought there was going to be a throwdown. Man, guy comes running in. It's like, yeah, you stole my money. I bought the pizza and you stole my money. I want my money. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I paid with a 20. Then I went over to CVS and now I only have like $3. And so you didn't give me enough money back. And I'm like, what did you buy at CVS? So I'm sitting there. He's like, you owe me $10. And he just gets madder and madder and madder and madder. I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I'm just sitting there like, oh, baby. And then I do this. I go, wallet. Oh, I don't carry cash. Because as this is escalating, I'm like, this dude, he's probably having a bad day. It's $10. He's offending everybody else around here. I would happily lose $10 of my own to bring peace to the situation. I will personally suffer. And so as I'm sitting there going, I think I have 20 in my car. So as I get up to go, another guy comes back in and says, hey, excuse me, sir. Hey, I got $10 for you. You said you're in a rush to get home to your family. Just go home to your family. Oh, you're okay with them stealing money? Now they're stealing your money. He's like, I'm actually totally fine with that. He entered in and he brought peace to a volatile situation. If you see peacemaking, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Peacemakers, those encounters with others, they always bring calm and reason into situations. As you sit back and you're watching, are these the people that others are going to for advice? Like, life is out of control. I just need to talk to Erin. If I can just get to Erin, she helps calm me down. That's usually a sign that there's a solid relationship going on. And listen, this doesn't mean they avoid conflict. Being a peacemaker doesn't say, oh, tension, run away. No, being a peacemaker says there's tension. I am willing to humbly step into this and bring about reconciliation. Now, these are just 4. I gave you 4. There's a whole bunch of other things here. Man, I really think that there's an attitude of thankfulness. That is a huge thing. Faithfulness. They show up. They say they're going to be there at 7. They show up at 7. They actually probably show up at 6:55. The yes is yes, their no is no. There's an attitude of prayer in their life. Man, I'll pray for you. And they're like, well, actually, can we just pray right now? Like, that just begins to mark their life. They're not jealous. They're forgiving. They're patient. They're kind. They're self-controlled. They're self-controlled. They're self-controlled. They're self-controlled. They're self-controlled. That addiction to porn that you think's hurting nobody, how does that translate once you're married? Why would your spouse trust you as you head out if you've shown no restraint as a single individual? Self-control. But it also comes into self-control with anger, self-control with eating, self-control and discipline within schedule, self-control in all finances. Joyful, loving, an encourager. They're selfless, humble. They're honest. And honest and loving. Because you can just be honest and you can really do a lot of damage, but you can use tact and communicate. They're okay. They submit to authority. No, my boss is always stupid. My boss doesn't know. If I were in charge, no. They're okay submitting to authority. Are they using their spiritual gifts? And by using it, I don't mean using it for their own gain. Are they using it to build up the body? Are they just mesmerized by Jesus? They might be having a ho-hum day, and then you just happen to say, yeah, I was reading the Bible. Wait, where were you reading? Where were you reading? What was going on? Tell me. Oh, the blind boy. That was a great story. I love that when Jesus said, oh, man, come on. Well, tell me more. Are they just mesmerized by who Jesus is? So these are just a few. Just a few. Now, next question. Do they have to be perfect in all areas? You know, so you're like, well, I'm going to make my little computer program. I'm going to have my little slider scales and contentment. I give them at least a 7, you know, and serving others, maybe a 7.2. Yeah, whatever that might be. Peacemaking, all right. Listen, we're not looking for perfect 10s. Otherwise, nobody would ever date anybody because we all fall short. So do they have to be perfect in all these areas? No. And remember, what I'm talking about, these are indicators for you to evaluate closer. And notice this, you can figure out if contentment is a mark of a person's life without going on a date with them. You really can. You can figure out if they are serving others without ever going out on a date, without ever being one-on-one. You can observe that without even actually ever talking to the individual. You can just watch, and not watch like a creeper. Oh, yes, you moved a chair. You know, like not like that, you know, but you can watch from afar. You can begin to see these traits. Peacemaking, you can see it. You can overhear at times. You'll be moving a chair because the only reason you're moving a chair because he moves a chair. But you're helping to move the chairs, and you're hearing somebody like, oh, there's a little friction over here, and they're talking about their boss, and it's just really a horrible situation. And the guy they're talking to says, yeah, man, that sounds hard. It's a really challenging situation, man. Have you thought about, like, man, where do you think Jesus is in the middle of all this? I mean, I went to something like that as well, and it hurt because I felt like I was passed over promotions. I can understand where you're going, but what I found was Jesus never left me in the middle of that. How do you think Jesus is working in the middle of that? And the other guy's like, I don't know, I've never thought about that. Well, man, let's think about that. Maybe in the middle of this, and you're sitting like, wow, this guy went from like he was angry, and now he's actually open to learning. Wow. And then you start, but you keep, again, creeper thing out of the way. So do they have to be perfect in all areas? No. And this is just I mean, if you want to wait for perfection, you can stay single your whole life. That's fine. Do they have to be perfect in all these areas? No. But I might go, if this is what I'm observing, that's probably not somebody that I want to go like, boom, boom, here is my most precious, boom, boom, part of me, boom, boom, my heart, and I want to entrust it with you because clearly you're going to be a great peacemaker if we have tension and friction, and you're definitely going to give me some grace, and definitely your contentment's not going to be based on my performance. No. And this is when you're like, no, you can cook. You need time just to grow. What about something like this? Man, high, whoo, really low. Even here, you sit there and there's not a mathematical formula for this. This is all I'm trying to say. When you see these things unfold and step into, like there's several positive categories, step into and begin to have conversations around those areas. And then as time unfolds, and that doesn't mean you're dating to have those conversations, step in, you get to know them. It's amazing here because these indicators, they provide the foundation for deeper conversations. So you could say something like this, hey, I've noticed that you are often helping and serving others. Where's that passion come from? Like, I mean, I just see it week in and week out. Like, why? And then listen to what they say and listen to how they say it. So that's where the pretender versus the real deal is going to be different. The pretender will say, I serve because Jesus serves me. Therefore, I should serve everybody else. You're like, wow, they might even quote it in Scripture. Wow. I would say be cautious. Or if the answer is like, man, I guess I don't even really notice that I'm serving. I don't know. I mean, God's just giving me He's given me a lot, and I've got time, I've got energy, and I have things. I mean, somebody should do it. Why not me? Do you see a difference there? Or whether if it's like, man, I go mow this lady's yard because my mom and dad, they divorced when they were younger, and my mom had to work 2 jobs, and so I always had to mow the yard. It was really tiring, but now she has kids who are sick, and so nobody can mow her yard, so I just go mow her yard because I can totally identify with what she's going through. Totally different thing than I serve because he told me to. And you should serve too. It's just a different thing. But these are foundations for you to enter into good conversations. These are deep conversations. These are the conversations you want to have because you're able then to continue your evaluation of the individual. Remember, when you're looking here at all of these things, it gives you wonderful areas to begin to communicate in, right? And as you get into greater and greater relational equity with the individual, and maybe they have an area where they're really, really low, you can begin to, like, man, I've just really noticed that it seems like you really talk badly about your boss a lot. And it seems like anytime that Todd says, like, hey, you guys should think about doing this, over the week, that you're always like, oh, can you believe he asked for 5 minutes? Like, it seems like you kind of have sometimes an issue with authority. Well, why would I ask that, Todd? I might lose the relationship. Because you understand the bigger picture. You want to have a proper evaluation. If that dude or that girl says, what are you talking about? Woo, self-control, anger, move that slider down. Like, you begin to understand more and more and more. But if they're like, you know what, you're right. I've always had just a slight issue with authority. And it stems from this. And God's really been working on me in this area. It's something I want to see him change in me. It's a totally different conversation. And I tell you what, somebody responds that way, you're like, oh my goodness, wow, boom, boom, that's a heart that beats after Jesus. Boom, boom, that's a heart that can probably be trusted with mine. You look at all these lists and it can be overwhelming, and you just sit there and think, well, there's no way, there's just no way I'll meet somebody who has all of those things. Okay, and? What's your point? I need to be married. Oh, so you have an idol of marriage. No, yes. If you are willing to go ahead and just sacrifice and go for the lowest of the low bar because you just desperately have to be married because marriage is going to solve all of your problems, well, let me give you a little news flash here. Let's just go to this next thing. It's really funny. So when you're receiving this love, before I do, let's say this is where they're ranked. This is what I have observed, okay? This is just, take it for what it's worth. Whatever value you put on that. I have noticed that if this is where people were before I do, after they say I do, this is what typically happens. Most cases, things slide down. They're like, I've already won you now. I can be the real me. We laugh, but it's true. I was able to put up with a lot of these things, but now that you said I do, you can't go anywhere. Let's talk about your socks. They stank, and they need to be picked up. You need to do it. Like, what? Hold on. Rarely have I seen those markers instantly go up after marriage. They usually go down, and those who are honest all the way throughout the dating process, they hold the same. One of the greatest things that I love about Aaron, when I was thinking about a lot of this stuff, I came down the other day, and I just had to thank Aaron. I mean, from 4,000 miles away, in our conversations, in our email, there was always consistency, but it was so easy to see this is a woman who loves Jesus. There was always this contentment. There was always joy. There was always a willingness to serve others. There was always this mesmerization by who Jesus Christ is and what he's doing in her life. It was so easy to evaluate from 4,000 miles away. And then I moved here, and it's only gotten better. You and I, we want to be people who will make it easy for people to evaluate. So let's just be us. Rarely does I do move that forward. It usually moves things backwards. Don't believe me? Talk to a married person. Just because the person scores well on all the indicators doesn't mean that the right one. I just really want to, I want to spend a long time here, but I want to spend a little bit of time. So just because they meet all those lists, okay, like, oh yeah, that doesn't mean they're the right one. You just need to understand that. It could be that you have other passions and other desires. They're just going in two different directions, and that's okay. But what you'll find as you step into a relationship with somebody who is complete and has all of those things and is mesmerized by Jesus, and you also are, you'll come in, you'll date, you'll begin to realize, golly, I think that you have a heart for people who are lost in Central Asia, or you have a place for people who are in Russia or wherever, and I have a heart really to God's given me a great mind in engineering, and I want to stay right here and reach into this engineering firm. I just think that God's maybe not calling us the same direction. And that relationship will end, If both people are like, no, it has to be this, it has to be this, that's okay. God's just leading different places, and it won't be messy. eHarmony, it was my second go of eHarmony with Aaron. My first go, there were several other people. I was like, okay. But then there was one gal, and she was awesome. Go back to the list here. I think I can go forward, to the list. I mean, really, this was going on in her. And yet, as we were dating, I just began to see, like, man, I really sense that God is calling me more and more and more towards, not just vocational ministry, but pastoring a church, pastoring and running a ministry, and that's going to require A, B, C, D, E, F, and G of me. And skill sets and how she's wired was just a little bit different. And I was like, I don't know that it's going to really line up perfectly with where God's leading me. And so that relationship ended. Were there hurt feelings? Yes. Were people who wasn't like, oh, okay, great. I mean, because there's still an emotional connection, but like, I understand, I get it. Weren't any punches thrown. There weren't any like, how dare you? None of that. But it wasn't the right individual. And it was really funny. I was thinking about this. The insanity of it. To have an individual who was all this, and then to say no. Because I have no idea what it's going to look like in the future, but I'm going to trust you, God, and I'm going to say no. I'm going to leave this relationship for the unknown. I don't know what that's going to look like. And yet when we trust God, crazy things happen. I was totally surprised when there was a prompting in me like, hey, join eHarmony again. I'm like, why? Like, it seems weird, but did. And then, bing, who did I get matched with? Aaron. And it's amazing, like, just as we are just so in sync in so many areas of our life, and our giftings just are really similar in some ways, and then they fill in gaps of the other, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. But I just want you to know that just because both of you might be HEB September 12thers, doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be together forever. All that this list does is it takes you from your pool of people to be interested in that's this wide, and it makes it really pretty small, which makes it really pretty easy. It really makes it pretty easy then for you to live. I'm going to trust Jesus. He's going to provide as he provides, and let's go. But I know my minimum standard is not just they're alive and breathing. Like, that's not my, no. I know my heart is worth, it's very valuable. Because God desires you to be loved with a love like this. 1 Corinthians 13, that's the type of love that he desires you to be loved with. Which tells you something about God. He absolutely loves you. We're not talking about this to restrain you, to sit there and go like, you're going to be single forever because you're never going to be anybody like that. That's not my motivation. If you think that, that's not it. My motivation is, man, I have a love for you. I want to see you walk well in relationships. I want to see you avoid heartache and heartbreak. And the best way to do that is to step into a relationship with somebody who has a life centered on Jesus Christ. That's the best possible thing that you can do. And to do something other than that is just really ridiculous in my mind. And I don't want to see you hurt like that, nor does God. So hold strong, hold fast, be determined that God, you've got this. You'll bring what I need when I need it. I've learned to be content in any circumstance. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, including living a life as a single individual for 30 years, for 40 years, for 50 years, because you are enough. We've had dialogues. Last time we were talking about dating. I'm going to move really quickly here because we're almost done. But I asked the trick question. Does the Bible promise that you'll be married? And people said no. And I said, well, you're wrong. What? See, we, the church, we are the bride of Christ. We're the bride of Christ. For eternity, we will be in a close relationship with him. And that starts even now, this close relationship. And here's why we're not content. We're not too impressed with that. We're just not impressed. Oh, we're married to Jesus. Because we don't understand who he is. We don't understand what he's given us. And because we're not mesmerized by who he is, then we turn to lesser things and we end up making a hot mess. As opposed to standing and going, man, he is the bride of the church. He cares for the church. He wants me to be loved this incredible way, and so I'm going to trust him. Because that's the type of love that he wants for me. Because he values me that much. Therefore, I should value me that much. And oh, by the way, because he wants you to be loved that way, he also wants you to give that kind of love. So as we sit here and we're like, oh, yeah, here's our grid and our framework. Oh, these are my top 3 things that I'm looking to see the identity of other people, to really see if they are drawing deeply from God, that primary relationship's intact. This is how I evaluate other people. How are we doing in that? Do we look like this? Then we really need to realize we are an August 12th HEB, and we need to step back. And God, you need to work in me. Transform me. Help me find my contentment in you. Help me be alone and not be lonely. I absolutely desire for that. Let me move on quickly here to helping the blind. And what I mean by that is my battery might have died. Hold on if I do that. Oh, did you just do it back there? That's exciting. Helping the blind. Boom. No, I think it's totally dead. Hit next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. Helping the blind. What I mean by this is sometimes, like my sister, when she was learning to drive, she went out in the car with my dad, and as they're driving down the road, she's like death grip. They're in this neighborhood that was just being built, no houses, just roads. And so she's sitting there and not driving very fast. And the squirrel, cute little squirrel, comes running out, okay? But she doesn't want to hit cute little squirrel. She's like, oh, there's a squirrel. And squirrels, they're just rude. But anyway, so the squirrel comes out, and it's there. She's like, I don't want to hit him. And so she tries to hit the brake, but she's so focused on the squirrel, she doesn't know which pedal is which. And so she keeps pushing the gas. She accelerates, but she's also so fixed at the squirrel, she's veering towards the squirrel, the very thing that she wants to avoid, because she is fixated with it. That is where she is going. What fixates you? Where are you going? Does it just mesmerize and captivate your heart? Because then you're going to look and see these things are going to happen in and through you. Or are you fixated on a boy and fixated on a girl? And when that happens, we're pretty blind because we're like, there are tens on everything. Oh, it's so great. Did you see him the other day? He drove his car. He drove his car? Yes, he went to work, and his work is helping others. What? Yes, he works at McDonald's. It's great. He serves people all day long. I'm like, maybe this isn't just the motivation of following Jesus. It might just be his jobs at McDonald's. That's why he serves. Being blinded by the circumstances, really quick, there's an awesome story. I love this one. And, keep going. Next one. There we go. Oh, awesome. Great. 2 Kings chapter 6. Elisha, he has been routing other kings. Like God has been telling him, like, oh, the king's going to attack from this point. And so Elisha tells the king, go down and block. And so they go down and block. And then the other enemy king says, oh, we'll attack up here. And Elisha tells his king, and that king moves up here. And so like, what's going on? We got to get this Elisha. And so Elisha's just hanging out. And he wakes up one morning, and the entire town that he's in is surrounded by the army. He's like, we're going to get this Elisha guy. And his servant comes out and says, uh-oh. Elisha, come quick. Look, Elisha. And Elisha's like, what? He says, don't you see the army? And Elisha's like, don't you see God? He's like, no, I only see the army. I'm fixated on the army. And so Elisha stops and he prays, oh, Lord, open his eyes so he can see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw that the hill was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. I was terrified because I didn't see what was really going on. See, you're going to have friends who are going to be blinded. They're going to be like, oh, he's so great. Oh, she's so great. They're just going to be in this little puppy dog, heart little eyes, and they're going to miss some major things. And we can learn a lot. Elisha prayed for them. Are you praying for your friends when they're entering into those relationships? But prior to that, Elisha also spoke truth. Like, hey, you don't need to worry. God's got this. Are you speaking truth into your friend's life? Because I care about you, I got to ask you some hard questions. I want to pause, and we'll wrap it up. This is on you. This is on you now, building a community around you that you are empowering them to ask you hard questions. It's really easy to go through and say, I'm just a victim. Nobody ever asked me the hard questions. Well, that starts now with you investing in other people and giving them the right to ask you hard questions. It'd be awesome if you sat there and you start dating somebody and you showed up and you're like, okay, Todd, here I am. Hey, ask me whatever hard questions you have. What? Wait, you have the freedom, Todd. Be hard. Ask me the questions. I'm really attracted to this Erin girl. Tell me. Well, my first question, I think she's married. And to me, what are you doing? But ask the hard questions. And you might even say, like, okay, you're not willing to ask the hard questions? You need to ask me, how are my physical boundaries? And then when I tell you fine, don't just rest with like, oh, okay, he said fine. No, be specific. What are they? Well, that's just none of your business. No, it is, because we need to be in community. We need to be having people who will hold us accountable, but that's on you. It's on you right now to begin to foster a community of men and women who will surround you and are asking you hard questions now. Because without it, you're going to walk in and you're going to be blinded, and nobody's going to come, and you're going to be like, well, I'm just a victim. Nobody ever let me know. Nobody ever let me know. But did you ever invite anybody into that type of relationship with you? Did you empower them to ask you the hard questions? Man, tell them, I give you the freedom. If you think that I'm just dating just somebody who's a freight train to like crazy town, ask me the questions. Like, hey, Todd, have you thought about the fact that like she killed 3 puppies last night at Junction? Like there's something not right with her. What are you talking about? Invite people into that community of yours. But what do? No. I got to stay alone. Because if I get into these relationships, I don't want anybody asking me the hard questions. Because if they ask me the hard questions, I know what the real answer is going to be, and that might mean that relationship needs to end. And I don't want that because I have my idol of a relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to be willing to help the blind person. But man, you need to set your network up right now. You need to be intentional. There are incredible people in this room who would love to walk with you. Not to judge you, not to deny you of anything, but to walk with you. So as the band's coming up, you thought I was going to forget, didn't you? You thought I was going to forget. I didn't. We talked about evaluation, specific indicators, help the blind, be willing to do that. And then the challenge I have for us this week, if you'll click the next slide, that'd be awesome, and we'll leave it at that slide, is simply this. Read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 4 through 7. I mean, if you really want indicators of what you should be looking for, read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 4 through 7. Check out Galatians chapter 5, the fruit of the Spirit. Those are great indicators of what you should be looking for to see like, oh, this is an indication of a solid relationship with Jesus. But take time, write down the characteristics that are being, love is patient. Like take a piece of paper and a pen and write patient. I know it'll take a while to write patient and might require some patience to write it. But literally slow down and reflect. This is the type of love that you should be loved with, and this is the type of love that you should be willing to give. And as you do that, what does God desire for you to receive? Just begin to think about that. What does that tell you about God's love for you, if this is the quality of love that he has for you? And then also during that time, what does God desire for you to give to another person? He desires that type of love. And so as you look at that list, you're like, love is patient. And you're like, man, I'm not very patient. And when you see the things that you're like, I know I would score myself low on these things, that's okay. Stop, talk to God about it, confess it, agree with him on those things, ask that he would help move you forward. And that community that you're establishing who asks you the hard questions, begin to say, hey man, did you take the challenge? No, I didn't take the challenge. Or well, you should have, because here's what I read in my challenge. I really stink at patience. Will you help hold me accountable a little bit this week? If you see me starting to lose it, like, can you just ask me how I'm doing the next time I see you? Yeah, sure, okay. That's inviting people into this whole thing. But that's the challenge for the week for y'all. Again, I say these things not to put up barriers to restrain you from anything. It's other than things that will hurt you. It's out of love. I'm not wanting to see everybody walk through life single the rest of their lives, but I want to see you walk well as a single throughout life, if that's what God has for you. And I want to see you walk well as a married person, if that's what God has for you. But marriage will never complete you. Only Christ does. We need to know that. Let's pray. Mighty God.